We're back again, folks. We're going to discuss conduct of the War of the Sixth Trumpet, paper number 141C_2. In the paper Preparing for the Wars of the End, 141A_2, we saw how the globalists began to undermine Western democracy. We saw that the paper stated that the globalists, in concert with the CCP, had commenced undeclared hostilities with the world and also the people of the communist nations themselves, using these weaponized viruses and vaccines from 2018. They began the virus weaponizations in 2003, as we saw from the patent registration. The globalists developed a virus and then transferred them to the Wuhan lab for finalization using bats, and then released the weapons on the world. These series of viruses were explained in the 141A to C series of papers. The next group to be released are the Marburg and smallpox groups. The US funded the gain-of-function research at Wuhan, reportedly through Fauci, using US allocated funds and funds by Gates, Soros and the Rockefellers. Judgment of the Appellate Court of Peru, 2021. Since then, Gates has been making statements about terror attacks using smallpox. The fact is that smallpox was eradicated except for 2 batches in the US and Russia, which was kept for research into weaponizing viruses. Someone in either laboratory has released it to the globalists. So we can continue on with this now, Wade. And then, of course, we all know what happened with COVID release and the weaponization of the vaxxers to try and eliminate us off the planet, to reduce the population. It's not hidden. They brag about it and boast about it.
Yes, Roger. That's, as you know, or we've discussed, that when this was written, they hadn't yet released, or theoretically hadn't released, the smallpox and the Marburg, but they have since released Marburg and smallpox. They've released the polio viruses. They've released monkeypox. They've released, well, we're not sure how they're progressing with smallpox, but they've released the polio viruses, and all of this is being used to develop the world systems, and they will use the New World Order to control these, and they're using them to create panic so they can bring in control systems. And anyone who tells the truth about the matters is subject to new legislation about misleading information.
Right, yeah, they're deemed as a crackpot and a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, so you tell the truth about all this stuff, you're the problem, and they'll put you in prison.
Right.
And no doubt they're unhappy about what we're saying, but that's the way it is. We'll keep telling the truth until we can no longer tell the truth.
Right, and it seems that the more effective these viruses that they do create, the more panic and is going to be perpetrated on everyone, and they will roll their sleeves up to get these death shots. But because COVID was so ineffective, they had to actually cause and fabricate deaths to try and get the numbers up, to get to a certain level of panic to allow people to capitulate for these injections.
Yes, well, be that as it may.
Yeah.
No matter what happens in these continuing releases of the Wars of the Fifth Trumpet, and people will get to the stage where they'll want to die and can't die because they've got these dreadful things inside them in the nanotechnology, and they're asking to die and they can't. Now, all those things with each release will cause the same repeats, and it'll go on until the end of the age and Christ stamps it all out. And we'll deal with this, the punishments of what these people are doing, and how we're going to deal with these politicians and bureaucrats and medical officers at the high administration But what we're going to look at now is how this war starts.
Right.
What happens? The answer is it will start from the Middle East. It will be precipitated by Iran and their proxies. And that's Lebanon, Gaza under Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in the Yemen, the Syrians in Syria, and then they'll be using the Shia operators in Iran, and then that will escalate, and Israel will be left with no choice but to initiate hostilities and war, and they will be wiped out. And the Iranian people themselves will turn on the Ayatollahs, and they will destroy this Shia Ayatollah regime in Islam. Lebanon will become part of Israel after the Messiah arrives. So also Gaza will be occupied by the New World Order NATO forces coming in from Europe into the Middle East. They will wipe Hamas out. The Houthis will be subjugated, and Iran will be subjugated.
Yes, the news before, there's now 125 nations against Israel, and there's only about 8 nations that are in favour of Israel doing what they're doing at the moment. So the whole world will be against Israel, trying to guarantee their own survival, and everyone's just going to
that won't be
escalate everything, and Damascus will be obliterated shortly.
Yeah,
that's coming up, and it's just going to escalate from there and get bigger and bigger until there's total nuclear conflagration all over the northern hemisphere.
Yeah. Yes, it won't be allowed, and what's going to happen is that these hostilities will develop, and they'll try and enforce peace agreements, and they'll declare peace, and then disaster will descend on them unawares.
Yes,
it can't be stopped. Now what's happening is that we've got an arrangement between Russia and China and Iran, and then that system will use Pakistan, who's a nuclear power also, and that will precipitate this conflict, and China will use that conflict to invade Taiwan, and Russia has already got 360,000 mobilized troops on its borders waiting to move into Europe.
Right.
That invasion will occur very soon, and there will be nuclear exchanges following that. They will come into Europe in 3 phases. There'll be a prong goes in through Finland and Sweden, and they will invade Norway through from the Russian border, which actually abuts Norway on the northern islands.
Oh, right, yeah, it's Finland and up north. Yeah, that's right, the Lapland.
Yeah, so that'll be the northern prong.
Yeah.
The central prong will go out through Poland and into Germany. That system will also move into Latvia and the Baltic states. And the southern prong, the third prong, will move in through Serbia into the Balkans, and they will then occupy Italy. That system will see the sack of the Vatican, as we wrote in the paper of that name.
Yep.
And we'll see that all of the priests in the Vatican will be shot, and this Pope will be executed on one of the hills of Rome, and the last Pope.
Yep.
Now, that sequence will go on, the prongs of the Russian forces will go on, and it appears as though they'll probably reach France and be stopped there.
So they're stopped by the beast power.
Yes, the
of the
Northern armies
European
will
forces.
stop them in France.
Yep.
And then that's the end of the story, or the beginning of the end of the story.
Right.
Then the armies of the Russians will be absorbed into the beast power and then used to subjugate the world. So the empire of the beast will be very powerful. They'll then move into the Middle East, occupy Israel. They will station their armies at Gaza all the way up through to Jerusalem.
Right, and they'll want to try and get rid of those two annoying old fellows off the Temple Mount, but they won't be able to.
Yes. Well, at that time, from that time onwards, over the 1260 days, which is effectively the 42 months of the Empire of the Beast,
Yeah.
they'll be preaching, and we'll deal with that under the Two Witnesses paper. But the important thing is that the world will be dealt with. And America has already sold its soul to the beast. And it has no proper politicians. It's all a uniparty system. They are corrupt everywhere, universally. And all of that will be brought to subjugation. And as all of this becomes more and more obvious to the populace will react. And they'll be driven underground, and they'll try and use their military force to subjugate the populace, but that's the end of it. They won't be able to do it quite well enough. And that will continue on in a dreadful situation around the world until the Messiah. And at the coming of the Messiah, all of that will be destroyed. And we will deal with that in another aspect, in another paper.
Thank you.